everyone. Rent has been going up across the country, way up, as much as 25% in some areas, including the City of Laurel and surrounding communities. I'm Communications Director Audrey Barnes. Thank you to the city leadership that is joining us tonight for this important webinar. Mayor Craig A. Moe is on the line, along with Councilman Keith Sidnor, who spearheaded this event. We also have joining us tonight Council President Brenta Smith. I see Councilman Carl DeWalt is on the Zoom call as well. Our City Administrator Christian Pooley is joining us, along with Deputy City Administrator Joanne Barr, and a host of other interested city leaders and community members. We also have tenants, renters, along with landlords on the call tonight. So this should be a very lively discussion. We hope to get to a lot of your questions tonight. The purpose of this webinar tonight is to provide some valuable information to both renters and landlords at this very critical time. The City of Laurel has teamed up with Community Legal Services of Prince George's County for this event. And we are joined by Ms. Kayla Williams, the supervising attorney for housing and eviction prevention for Community Legal Services of Prince George's County. She really has a lot of good information to pass along tonight. If you have any questions and you would prefer not to ask them yourselves, you can put them in the chat box and we will get to them at the end of Ms. Williams' presentation. Also, if you are going to be speaking on the Zoom call, if you can, turn your camera on so we can see who we're talking to when we get to the question and answer period. So Kayla, let's go ahead and get started. From all the comments we've been seeing on our social media as we have been promoting this event, there seems to be a couple of key things that people want to know. They want to know what are the landlord's rights? Can they just raise rents whenever they want to? Also, they want to know what are the
recording in progress.
What are the community consequences of a rent strike and the procedures for that? And also people want to know how to file a complaint if the property is not being maintained, but the rent is going up. So I know you have a presentation, you're going to be addressing some of those issues. So let me turn it over to Kayla Williams to get us started tonight. Ms. Williams.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And once again, Kayla Williams, Supervising Attorney with Community Legal Services. I'm going to share my screen. It's probably about a 15 or 20-minute presentation, so it shouldn't take too long. And I'm happy to share it afterwards if anyone needs it. And of course, please feel free to ask any questions at the end of the presentation. Okay, so today we'll be discussing rent increases, rent strikes, and what to do when repairs aren't being made. This is not county or city specific. It's going to be generally for the entire state of Maryland. I'll just give you a brief overview of who Community Legal Services is. We are a nonprofit legal services organization. We pretty much provide any type of civil legal representation for non-fee generating cases. One of our biggest programs is our tenant representation program, which takes place in both Prince George's County at the Hyattsville District Courthouse, as well as Anne Arundel County in both the Glen Burnie and Annapolis District Courthouses. If you are a tenant and you do receive a summons for an eviction proceeding, we may be able to assist you at an upcoming hearing. If you're a landlord and if you need assistance, you can contact either the Maryland Court Self-Help Center. There's also other attorneys that you may be able to speak with. And I briefly summarize our tenant representation program, so I won't discuss this slide again. And again, just as a brief overview, we'll first start to discuss rent increases, when they are allowed and if there are caps on them. We'll then go into briefly information about rent strikes and the benefits as well as the consequences. Then we'll discuss what happens if a landlord does not make repairs after being notified of the issues. So in terms of rent increases, unfortunately, there is no statewide rent control statute. There used to be a statute in the real property article that provided some information about what the state of Maryland could and could not do in regards to raising rent. However, that statute has expired. So what that means is the laws regarding whether a landlord can increase rent are going to be left to the different counties as well as local jurisdictions. Currently, not to my knowledge, I'm not aware of any rent cap laws that are effective in Maryland, that are effective in Anne Arundel County or Prince George's County. In regards to rent control statutes in Maryland, there's only maybe a few jurisdictions. I think the Tacoma Park area and Montgomery County, they recently had some rent control laws that were in effect, but they have expired. During the pandemic, when Governor Hogan had initiated his state of emergency, there were certain protections on rent increases. So if you had been impacted by the pandemic, I know Prince George's County and Anne Arundel County put a cap of about, I think, 2.5% on rent increases. But when the state of emergency expired, so did those laws. So what that means is landlords can now increase the rent. There's really no cap that I'm aware of in Anne Arundel or Prince George's or most jurisdictions outside of, I believe, Tacoma Park. If a landlord wants to increase the tenant's rent, they have to give the tenant some type of written notice. This notice may also be in the lease already. So it's very important that when you are signing a lease, you read it very carefully to see if there's any automatic renewal clauses or to see if once the lease expires, if there's going to be an increase in the rent. And additionally, it's important to keep in mind that landlords can charge late fees throughout the state of emergency. Those were also prohibited in certain jurisdictions, but they currently can provide or they can charge late fees. However, it is capped at 5%, and that is a Maryland law. So in terms of increasing a tenant's rent, a landlord can do this. However, they have to give some type of written notice. So there's different types of tenancies that a tenant may enter into. So if you sign a lease for a weekly tenancy, if the landlord wanted to increase your rent, they'd have to wait until after your lease expires, but that notice has to be given at least 7 days before that tenancy expires. If you have a month-to-month lease, meaning, and oftentimes we see month-to-month leases, if you sign a year-long lease and then it expires and it's not renewed, it may automatically become a month-to-month lease. So it's important, once again, to read your lease to see if it's going to renew as a year-long lease or if it's going to renew as a month-to-month. But if you are a month-to-month tenant, if your landlord wishes to increase your rent or amend the contract in any way, they are required to give you at least 1 month's written notice of what that increase will be. And if you sign a year-long lease, usually the landlord's going to be required to give you at least 30 or 60 days written notice. Oftentimes, again, that notice is going to be provided in the lease. I think it's important to note that when a landlord gives you some type of written notice stating that they plan to increase your rent, that is considered an offer. You're not required to accept that offer. It is simply your landlord putting you on notice that they wish to increase your rent. And if you sign that contract, if you sign that lease, you are accepting the terms of that rent increase. And we'll talk about when a landlord can't increase rent in the next slide, I believe. So what to do if your landlord does increase your rent? You want to first check to see if there are limits in your particular jurisdiction or if there are caps on rent increases. What I do occasionally is if you just go to a Google search, you can type in your county code, or usually there's city codes. So the City of Laurel, I believe they have their laws and ordinances online. You can just type that in and see if there are any laws that prohibit certain rent increases in your jurisdiction. If there aren't, you want to then check to see if your landlord has given you proper notice. So if your landlord just says, hey, I'm increasing your rent, they say it verbally, that's considered illegal in Maryland. It has to either be in your contract or they have to give you some type of additional notice before that rent can be increased and before it takes effect. You can also try negotiating with your landlord. And I think we'll talk about that on the next slides, but one of the benefits of trying to negotiate with your landlord, especially if you do it with a large quantity of people, is perhaps the landlord may be more willing to work with you individually or as a whole if you come to them and maybe either work out some type of alternative arrangement. You can also contact your local county council members or your representatives, maybe to bring it to their attention. But also, if you're curious to know if there are any ordinances or any caps on rent increases in your jurisdictions, they may have that information. And once again, just note that a rent increase letter, so if a landlord gives you a letter regarding a rent increase, that is considered an offer. You're not required to accept, but if you do sign, you're signing a contract. So what that means is if you sign agreeing to a rent increase and then you don't pay that rent increase, the landlord then could file something with the court, either to seek an eviction or they can try to take some type of action to collect on that. Also important to note, if you decline, so if a landlord gives you something in writing stating that they plan to increase your rent, but you do not sign it, meaning that you don't wish to continue to enter into a tenancy with them, understand that if you do not sign that contract, but you continue to reside there, your landlord may bring some type of eviction action against you. So to protect yourself, you just want to get clarity as to whether or not you're planning to stay there, whether you're a month-to-month tenant, or whether you're going to agree with the rent increase that your landlord is proposing. So there are certain instances when a landlord cannot increase rent, and I think I may have briefly covered some of these. So a landlord cannot retaliate against a tenant. So if tenants were making certain complaints about the conditions in their property, for example, or if they decided to organize to collectively bring certain issues to the landlord's attention, the landlord can't just say, you know what, I find them annoying, I'm going to increase their rent, maybe to try to get them to leave. That could be considered retaliation. But along those lines, I will say there is a Maryland statute regarding retaliatory eviction. And the remedy may be to sue a landlord civilly if a landlord does do some type of retaliatory eviction. The only caveat is in order to bring such an action, the tenant would be required to be current on the rent. So if a tenant is behind on their rent, they may not be able to bring a retaliatory eviction action. So just something to keep in mind. And of course, the landlord they can't increase the rent based on some type of discriminatory practice. So they can't do it based on a tenant's identity or disability, things like that, just because they don't like them for a particular reason that could be seen illegal. They can't increase the rent without giving proper notice. So if you're in the middle of a year-long contract and your landlord just says, hey, I'm going to increase your rent effective tomorrow, that could be seen illegal, or could be considered illegal, and it could give rise to either challenge it in court or to file a complaint. If your landlord has filed a court case against you to seek back rent based on what you believe are illegal rent increases, you can dispute that in court. So I would always recommend that if you do receive a court summons, you do appear. It may be a possible defense. But if you just want to file a complaint with like a state agency, I would probably recommend first contacting the Attorney General's office. You can file a complaint on their website. It's just marylandattorneygeneral.gov. And I believe that they have an office, they have a consumer protection division, but they also do some type of mediation. So it may be worth your while to just sit down with the AG's office and see if they can try to mediate or reach a resolution with the landlord and the tenant in regards to what could be a potential or illegal rent increase. So in terms of rent strikes, there are benefits, but there are also certain consequences that you should be aware of. In terms of the benefits, one of the biggest things is there's power in numbers. So if multiple people are deciding collectively not to pay their rent, you could ideally create systematic change, and it could lead to negotiations between the landlord and the tenant to hopefully bring that rent down, maybe look at what the market is charging, and just take everything into consideration to reach a resolution that works for all parties. However, there are also consequences. If a tenant decides to not pay their rent, they want to make sure that they at least keep that rent to the side. They want to make it available so that at some point when they do have to pay it, they have those funds available. There are certain remedies, and we'll discuss this later. There's certain remedies that a tenant is entitled to bring if the grounds or if the reason for the rent strike are dealing with maintenance issues and things like that. But it's just important to keep in mind that you want to keep that money to the side and available. The reason being is there's no codified law that protects tenants from rent strikes. So what that means is if you withhold your rent, your landlord could proceed with an eviction action. And if you don't have a valid defense that's according to either Maryland or county law, it could lead to an eviction if that money isn't available either to pay to the court or to pay to the landlord. So again, rent strikes I think are good to create systematic change, but also you just want to make sure that if you're not paying that rent to the landlord, that you at least keep it in some type of alternative account so that it is available at some point when you do have to pay either the court or the landlord. I'm going to switch over to repairs. So if, for example, the rent strike is based on repairs not being made, or just in general, if repairs aren't being made, there's certain things that you may be able to do before you go to the court. There's nothing wrong with going to the court. However, that can sometimes be a fairly lengthy process. So before filing anything with the court, I would first recommend notifying the landlord. Occasionally, tenants will assume that their landlords know of certain issues, and the landlord generally may not know. So it's important that you put them on notice of the issues that are present, and you also want to make sure that you give them an opportunity to repair those issues. You also want to take pictures and document all of the issues that exist. And I always recommend that you put all communication in writing. So even if that's just an email, put all correspondence in writing. That way you have a timestamp of what was said, when the pictures were taken, when you first notified the landlord of certain repairs, things like that. You can also call the county or city inspector. I believe if you call 311, you can file a report if there are certain issues that you want to bring to their attention. And lastly, if you wanted to get the court involved, you can file something called a rent escrow case. And we'll talk about that in the next slide. So if there are serious defects in your property to which you told your landlord about, but they are not or refuse to fix within a reasonable amount of time, there may be something called a rent escrow case that you can file. It's important to note that in Maryland, in general, there's no right to withhold rent. So if you withhold rent, for regardless of what the reason is, the landlord may bring an eviction action against you. However, as a defense to that, to some eviction actions, or on your own, you may be able to file something called a rent escrow case. And essentially, it's important to keep in mind, rent escrow is not going to cover minor defects. So if there's things like cracks in your in the paint or broken tile, that's not really posing a health or safety issue, but it's more cosmetic. That's not what rent escrow is for. It's primarily for serious safety defects. So if you have structural defects, sometimes we see porches that where the handlebar is missing, or there's cracks in the pavement, which could pose a tripping hazard. If you don't have, if your toilets, you can't use them, or if they're overflowing, sometimes we'll have cases where there's sewage that's backing up into the toilet or the tub. If there's like holes in your ceiling or things are falling out of your ceiling, things like that, infestation of rodents, those are issues that rent escrow may be able to address. It's important to keep in mind though, it does not apply if you have 3 or more prior judgments and a failure to pay rent case. So the courts, and I think our legislators just want to know, they want to make sure that rent escrow is not being used as a way to not pay rent. But it is, they want to make it available for people who actually need to get the court involved because the issues aren't being resolved on their own. So a prerequisite to rent escrow is the tenant has to give the landlord notice of the issues that exist, as well as an opportunity to repair. So a tenant Ideally, they can't tell the landlord that something is wrong and then the next day decide to file a rent escrow case because technically the landlord didn't have an opportunity to repair the issues. And that could be a potential defense that the landlord could raise at the hearing. There may be other defenses as well that a landlord could raise. For example, if they allege that the tenant caused the issues, or if the tenant tells the landlord about certain issues that exist, but then refuses to let them in to fix the issues, that could be a defense that's raised by a landlord in opposition of a rent escrow case. So it's important if you do wish to file a rent escrow case, it's important that you put the landlord on notice. And it's important that you also give them the opportunity to come in to repair the issues. And one thing that we see in court often is for rent escrow, you have to be living in the property because the goal of the case is to fix the issue so that you can continue to live there. So once a rent escrow case is opened, it's a simple form. You can find it online. You can also find it at the court clerk's office. Once you fill out that form, the court will mail both parties a court hearing date with a date and time to appear. And at that hearing, the court will determine, they'll hear the issues, and then they'll determine whether or not to open up a rent escrow case. If a rent escrow case is opened, they will order the tenant to pay whatever rent is owed to the court. So this is why it's important that you have that rent available, because if you were withholding it from your landlord and then you go to file a rent escrow case, but you don't have it, the court will likely decline to open up the rent escrow, or later down the line, the rent escrow case could be dismissed, and then the landlord can bring certain eviction proceedings against the tenant. So once the rent escrow case is opened, the tenant will pay whatever rent is owed to the court. The court will then order a county or a city, usually it's the city or the county, they'll order an inspection. And then that inspector will come out to the property, they'll look at what the issues are, and then they'll provide a report to the court for the court to look at. The rent escrow may continue. It could take weeks, it could take months, however long it takes for the issues to be fixed, or if the tenant and the landlord reach some type of agreement and decide to close it, or for whatever reason it's closed, that's when the rent escrow case will be closed. So in terms of the relief sought, ideally the rent escrow case will be closed because the issues are fixed. However, there's certain requests that either a tenant or a landlord can make once the rent escrow case is closed. So if the repairs are made, the landlord may say, I want some or I want all of the money that was paid into rent escrow to go back to them. Or the tenant can ask for either some or all of the rent to go back to them. The court will take things into consideration, such as how long it took the landlord to fix the issues, the amount. Sometimes I hear landlords say, well, it cost me this much to make the repair. Sometimes the landlord will take those things into consideration. So either party can ask for some or all of the rent to go back to them. One thing to keep in mind, when you're in rent escrow, if the repairs aren't made within 6 months, the tenant can ask for all of the rent. And at least in Prince George's County, I don't know about other jurisdictions, but typically in Prince George's, the court doesn't really give 100% of what was paid into rent escrow to either party, at least from what I've seen. They'll usually divide it up equitably, and they'll take things into consideration again based on how long it took, the severity of the issues, things like that. Another form of relief that the tenant can ask for when they're in rent escrow is for a reduction of their rent. So if their monthly rent is $1,200, but based on the defects, say they weren't able to use a room in their house, they may want to ask for a reduction of $200 or $300, or however much they believe is fair. And the court will then consider whether or not they want to grant that request. And that concludes my presentation. And I hope let me stop sharing my screen. I hope this was helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. We have a good amount of time left. So I'm available to answer any questions that anyone has.
I noticed that. Thank you very much, Kayla. That was some great information. You answered a lot of questions just in your presentation. I do want to recognize Councilman Martin Mitchell has joined us on this Zoom call as well. Thank you, Councilman. Anybody have any that's on the Zoom right now? Let's start with some of your questions. I've seen some in the chat, but I'd like to give those who are on the Zoom an opportunity. Kaya Jefferson, you have a question for Ms. Williams? Your hand is raised, Kaya. Unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name's Kia Jefferson. Thank you for that presentation, Kyla. I do have a question regarding the high rent increases. I've been a resident of Laurel for 20 years. I've been in the same apartment for the last 17 years. And every year I got a 3%, 5% increase until this year. I got a new landlord and they immediately hiked up my rent an additional $800 a month. That's a 54% increase. And I just want to know what can be done. I mean, with that type of increase, they are definitely pricing people out. And I love Laurel. I love my neighborhood. I've lived here for 17 years. I could go on and on about how great Laurel is. But my question is, what can the city do against these rent abuses?
So I believe that it's not just a city issue. I believe it's a state of Maryland issue. It is a legislative issue, and I think that it would be helpful if we had laws on the books that put some type of cap on rent increases. And I think it would require both the landlords and the tenants to kind of sit down and figure out what is fair and marketable or equitable. However, I think that the reason I say that it's a state of Maryland issue is if you go to the real property article and the Maryland Code, which governs landlord-tenant proceedings in Maryland, there used to be a statute regarding rent increases. However, it's expired. And for whatever reason, our state of Maryland legislators have not revisited that. So I would probably recommend that you reach out to your legislatures, not just on the city level, but on the state of Maryland level, because the General Assembly meets each year and they want to hear from constituents about what issues they're facing. And I think this is going to be a really big issue because it's not just the city of Laurel, it's everywhere. We're all seeing increases. And of course, some of it is due to inflation. And I know there's additional costs that some landlords are having to come up with. I think they lost out on some income throughout the pandemic, but I think it's a state issue. So I would just say talk to your legislatures, continue to try to negotiate with your landlord to see if they're willing to come down at all. Sorry you're having to go through that.
Let's take another question. Is anybody who's on the Zoom call? Thank you, Kia. Anybody else on the Zoom call that would like to make a comment or have a question for Ms. Williams?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead, Ruth.
Yeah, thank you. This was very informative. Is there a way I can get a copy of that PowerPoint?
Absolutely. Audrey, I can email you after the presentation and feel free to distribute.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question, Ruth. And I also want to let everybody who's tuning in know that this entire presentation will be uploaded to the Laurel TV YouTube page. So you can go back and listen to it again and get any kind of information that you may have missed. But we're going to upload it. It should be on the Laurel TV official YouTube channel by tomorrow. So check back and re-listen to this part you may have missed. Thank you for that, Ruth. Any other questions?
Hi, I have a question.
Go ahead, Ellen. We hear you.
Yeah, so I'm here because I wanted to I got a really mild COVID infection in 2020. I was totally active, healthy, like, normal, young, whatever. And I've been housebound for 2 years with severely debilitating neurological problems. Like some days I can't actually understand normal paced speech or speak at a normal pace myself. I can't sit upright without my heart racing so fast that I have to lie down or I'll pass out. And so it's like, so there's currently no treatments for us, but I also had like a $400 per month rent increase that we managed to negotiate down. But what protections are in place for people like me? And there's more and more of us after every wave. But for anyone who's disabled, to be able to stay safely housed instead of facing these insane rent increases.
Mm.
I can't really speak on particular protections regarding rent increases and disabilities. I know in certain cases there are requirements for reasonable accommodations, but I'm not sure if that would apply in regards to the rent increase issue. Um, I would probably say you may want to reach out to our office and we can see if we can do a little bit more research about that issue. Um, I will say, I may have mentioned this. I'm not sure if did your rent increase recently take effect or did it take effect during the like,
Thanks to some help from CASA and other and like the tenants that we organized, I'm okay right now. But there's so many people like me, and who knows what's going to happen next time. And so I just want to advocate because every wave of COVID, there's like another what 1 to 5% of people who are permanently disabled. And if you're young, it's really terrifying for the rest of your life, right?
Ellen, we hear you, and we're so sorry that you are having to deal with those health issues. And we will be posting some additional information from Ms. Williams. So check back and let's see if we can get some more relief for you. Thank you for that, for sharing that with us. You're very brave to do that. I have a call from Greenbelt. They're asking, could the City of Laurel pass a law or bill restricting large percent rent increases? So I don't know if any of our legislators or our City of Laurel leaders who are on the call would like to tackle that question.
Yes.
Go ahead. Councilman Martin Mitchell.
Yes.
So your answer is yes. Okay. All right. So that was for, is it Lori Rosenthal from Greenbelt? That answer was from Councilman Martin Mitchell. Let's see, Councilman DeWalt, you have your hand raised as well. You're just trying to unmute yourself. You're still muted. There you go.
All right. First question is for Kayla. Kayla, you said that during the pandemic, what are we going to put the pandemic at? It's 2.5 years, 3 years, or whatever. They still during a pandemic, and this would have to show Ellen's case too, that during a pandemic, they were still allowed to raise rent for up to 2.5%. So we're looking at almost a 7.5% increase during, even when we have a pandemic. And you hear cases like Ellen, what was that the virus debilitated her to a point where she couldn't even hardly move. And I met Ellen, and it was shocking to me to see how this woman was suffering, and to be able to, for these landlords to be able to raise that rent still during that pandemic at 2.5% is absolutely disgusting. And my other thing is, just like what Kia said, almost 48%, almost 50%, they raised her rent.
54%.
54%. And for the state, and this is all the politicians that have been there for a long, long time, the county, the City of Laurel, not to have something in effect in our ordinance, at least to try to stop these landlords from raising rent it's not even, it should be unlawful, but it should be immoral for them to go to sleep at night and sleep a comfortable sleep, knowing that people during a pandemic and to raise people's rent up to 50%. And they don't discriminate. they go against soldiers, they go against the military, and they go against our seniors who are on fixed incomes. And it's sad because the 4 or 5 seniors up on 11th Street, where we had to actually give some of the ARPA money to at least keep them in there, where their increases almost went up well over $500, and at least they're there for another year so that they can actually find another place that's affordable to them to live. It's just heartbreaking. It's totally heartbreaking. And whoever called from Greenbelt, we need laws. We need them from the state, we need them from the county, and we definitely need them from the city. And if we don't get on this immediately, then we're derelicting our duties as far as of helping our citizens. We have an affordable housing program, which I brought to light at least 3-4 years ago. And I called every one of these places, and Evolution at Town Center, Duval at Westside, and Avalon in Laurel. And now you're looking before the pandemic. And I called each one of them. And they're in our affordable housing program. And all 3 of them, when you figure out the rent, the sewage, the parking, and any other fees they charge, each one of them for a single bedroom, and some of them were efficiencies, they were nearly or above $2,000 at that time. Now you tell me what affordable housing is above or close to $2,000, and that's 3-4 years ago. So I'm not talking about the increases right now. And it was ridiculous at the time that we would even characterize that as affordable housing program, because most people can't afford it unless you're making a lot of money. And this is for seniors. Hold on, I'll give it right from the thing. Residents of retirement age, public sector employees in moderate income ranges, and young adults forming new households. And nobody could afford that. Nobody. And the whole thing is, it just behooves me that we have gone this long in the year 2022, and we still, through our state legislators, through our county executives, and through the politicians before me in the city of Laurel, and nobody has ever, even when I brought this up, not one other person on that council even mentioned it or stood up for it. And it's sad. It's very, very sad that we can't, for one, protect our veterans, protect our seniors, and protect the most vulnerable, just like Ellen.
Thank you very much, Councilman DeWalt. We appreciate your sentiment tonight. We have a couple more questions we want to try to get to. I see Daryl, you have a question for the panel tonight or comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. I actually, some of the other speakers, we all kind of live in the same complex that experienced a 50 really high rent increase, and we were able to negotiate it down, but that's only for a year. And even if we have a year and the rent goes back up to that 50%, even if you move somewhere else, if all the rent moves up, then there's really no point in even trying to negotiate, because if you move somewhere else, it's the same price. And most of these places, even if you can afford the higher rent, a lot of the applications is, it requires you to have 2 to 3 times the monthly rent, which is, you can afford rent, but if they're asking for 2 to 3 times that monthly rent there's no way you can afford that, especially even being single, or even being, making 80, 90, $1,000, $90,000 a year. That's still very expensive. And, I'm not speaking for everyone else, but, I would say, like, even for like a $60,000, $50,000 I mean, that's crazy expensive with no cap on that. Like I said, the monthly rent maybe isn't, maybe you can afford it, maybe you can't. But if you go somewhere else and you still have to have that 2 to 3 times rent, uh, that's like crazy amount. Some people can't even pass that portion of it.
Daryl, that we appreciate that, and we're hearing that from people throughout the city and our surrounding communities. So we appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Kayla, is that what you're hearing at CLS, that the rent increases are reaching 50% or more in Prince George's County?
Yes, yes. And I'll be frank with you, it happened to me too as well. And I live in Anne Arundel County. I live in Laurel, but on the Anne Arundel County side. And when I renewed my lease, it increased about $400, and it was already pretty expensive. So yes, a lot of the calls that we receive are in regards to just rent increases, because people were already struggling due to the pandemic and being out of work and being sick. But then this is an additional hurdle that's nearly making it impossible to try to catch up. They're trying to make payments, but it's impossible because they're tacking on late fees and then the rent increases.
You know what's the funny part is I won't name where we live, but our landlord experienced the same exact thing with his mother. And I straight up asked him when we had a meeting, like how he felt about that, if he agreed or disagreed with the rent increase for his own mother, and he wouldn't even give me a straight answer. Like he beat it around the bush for it. So like even he knows that it's pretty crappy.
Is
I
there
found
some
that
concrete
I found that
advice,
very
Kayla?
ironic.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, Daryl. Thank you for
No, you're
that.
fine.
Kayla, is there some concrete advice we could offer? I mean, your PowerPoint presentation had a lot of steps that people can take. Is there, where do you start when you're experiencing a $400 to $500 rent increase and it just kind of slaps you in the face and there you are? What would your step one be for people?
I wish I had a concrete answer, but I don't, unfortunately. I think the first thing to do is you can ask your landlord to see if they're willing to negotiate. If they're not, you can decline their offer and say, I don't wish to live here anymore. But then, of course, the concern is you try to find someplace else and it's just not affordable. Um, that's my only suggestion, because there's nothing holding the landlords accountable at this time.
There's also something that, I keep hearing that it's like state law, but it's written to pass all such ordinances, resolutions, or regulations not contrary to the Constitution and laws of the state of Maryland or this charter, as it may deem necessary for the good government of the city, for the protection and preservation of the city's properties, rights, privileges, for the preservation of peace and good order, for securing persons and property from violence, danger, or destruction, and for the protection and promotion of the health, safety, comfort, convenience, welfare, and happiness of the residents of and visitors of the city. To me, rent increases pretty much goes against that.
I appreciate that sentiment, Daryl. Ruth, your hand is up. Did you have an additional comment or did you just have it up from last time?
No, thank you so much. Yeah, I just wanted to say that I have tried for a long time to some people I'm working with to put them on the Section 8 waiting list in Prince George's County. And the waiting list is so long that you can't even get on the list. And another thing about the housing, which is really discouraging, is when people are struggling to pay, they get behind, they get turned over. Then that shows up. And then when they go to try to get housing somewhere, they say, oh, you didn't pay last time, you were late, we're not gonna take you. They do criminal background check, and then it kicks them out of the system. So they just get further behind. And I'm working with a guy right now that's been in a tent in the woods for a year, and I just put him somewhere, thank God, I found a room. But he had a job, he was doing great, he had an apartment, and the place folded. But anyway, it's really devastating because it becomes this spiraling down sort of situation that people can't crawl out of. And that's really what I want to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ruth. Mary Cook, your hand's been up for a while. Let's get to your question. Would you like to ask the panelists something?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm the community liaison for Councilmember Tom Dernoga. And I'm very aware of the situation that these people are talking about tonight. And again, we won't name that place. But Ms. Williams, I have a question for you. Let's say that people were overcharged during the pandemic, those, I don't know, let's say 2 years. Could they possibly get some of those monies back?
Yes, I think that would be a fair request to make. I would probably first recommend mediation, just because it may be a little quicker. So I know there's mediation through Maryland courts, but there's also some local entities that provide mediation. Hopefully they can sit down, review the ledgers, and hopefully the landlord and the tenant can reach a resolution as to how much the tenant may be entitled to. If not, if the tenant wanted to file like a civil case to get that money back, that may be an option. And alternatively, if the landlord were to sue, or if they were trying to evict the tenant in Hyattsville, the tenant could raise that as a defense if they were unlawfully charged, to prevent the eviction at least.
And may I just ask what type of documentation, should the renter have?
If they have a ledger, that would be helpful, or if they have receipts. And also if they have a copy of whatever statute or law they're referring to in regards to the unlawful charges, that would be helpful. But of course, that's where a lawyer could also be helpful to look up what laws were in effect at that time and what to look out for.
Thank you.
Hope that helped, Mary. I'm just looking for hands. I have a couple questions. Let's see. Any of the panelists have anything they'd like to ask?
Yes,
Ms.
I have a
Barnes?
question.
Yes, I'm here.
So my question, I think Kayla earlier, when you were talking about notifications to the tenants. So there is some type of required notification. I think you said written notification if there's a rent increase. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And written, that applies as email and I'm guessing like typed out handwritten as well.
Technically, yes. Yes, technically. I mean, ideally, it would be something formal, typed up, an actual amendment, but I think it could be anything in writing.
Sure. I was just curious on what legally constitutes that written. And then as far as like notification when there's a sale for like a multi-family, multi-dwelling unit.
When you say there's I don't
Like so like if it's switched ownership, like if there was a sale, is there also required notification for the tenants like after the sale is complete?
I'm not sure if it's required. Generally, whoever purchases the property will just step into the shoes of the original landlord. I don't know that it's required that they notify them of a change in management. Ideally, that would happen, but I can't point you to anything that would require that.
Sure, understood. Thank you.
Floor is open. Anna Rodriguez, you have a question for Ms. Williams? Go ahead. Anna Rodriguez.
¿No hay nadie que hable español?
Kayla, do you speak Spanish?
No, I'm sorry.
Is there anybody on the call that speaks Spanish? If we do not, if you could email me tomorrow, I have several Spanish-speaking staff members that can help with your question, if you can understand me, and we'll get the answers for you tomorrow in Spanish.
Yes, I'm with the person right now.
Okay.
And they have a couple questions, but I still have a lot of community in the call, and they not speak English at all. That's me. However, the information you just give everyone, they didn't understand what do you guys say. To me, it's really important in this meeting to have somebody translate it to have the community understand what they say.
We agree absolutely, and we are going to, what I think a really good solution is to take the transcript from this Zoom call, and we have the ability to do that and translate it into Spanish and then provide that to the community. So that is one step that we'll be taking. And then Anna, if you could reach out to me offline, I would be happy to serve as the city's liaison with our Spanish speaking community and get some of these questions answered, get them all into one place. So if you could help me gather some of that information, we will try to get that back to our Spanish speaking community, because we feel it's important to have that kind of community outreach. So thank you for being on and being willing to help us get that information where it needs to go. And my email address is I think it's on the screen, but it's you can find my email address online, but I'll give it to you now. Are you prepared to write it down?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, Anna, let's talk offline. I have your information. I will contact you, and then we'll get together and see what we can do about pooling some of the questions for everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm looking in the chat box.
Ms. Barnes,
Yes, go ahead.
there is an Eddie Mayorga who has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Eddie. I don't see you, but go ahead and ask your question, please. Eddie Mayorga. I don't see them. I don't see a hand. So maybe we change their mind.
Somebody speak Spanish?
Yeah.
Hello?
We do.
Yeah, you can listen. Okay. I am listening. I want to know if you can do the stop for a bus. All the increase the rent in Laurel City. I am living in Westgate apartment in Laurel, but they increase the rent too high. You know, that is 1 year, 1 year and 6 months ago. They increased me rent around $400, and I have family, and I have I need that money when living in my family, and we and have any and another moment for celebrate or something with my kids. When they increase the rent, I not can do that more. It's a little difficult, not only for me, you know, for every family living in this area. You can do something and they stop all the increase the rent in this area.
Mr. Mayorga, I want to pass along the Community Legal Services contact information. And this is where you can get specific answers to your questions. And Anna Rodriguez, if you're still on the line, this is another great contact for you. This is Miss Kayla Williams' organization, and they can answer more specific questions. So please pass this along to some of our Spanish speaking listeners so they can get their questions answered as well. But the email address, let's start with that for everybody who's listening. The email address is info@clspgc.org. That's the email address for Community Legal Services of Prince George's County. You can also go to their website to get some information, and it's www.clspgc.org. And we're going to put that up again on the screen as soon as we can. But please pass that along. Also, here's another bit. I have a phone number for you. So if you can also have them call in their questions. Here's the phone number. It's 240-391-6370. And some of the callers are saying that before CLS has had Spanish interpreters on some of these community events. So we're going to see what we can do to try to get some of our Spanish speaking listeners' questions answered. But for those of you who are able to get this phone number to CLS, to people who might be interested, please pass it along. We will all certainly be posting it on City of Laurel social media sites as well. So pass along that contact information. And also that Zoom call, this Zoom call will be translated into Spanish, and it'll be going up on our YouTube channel. So that's another resource for people.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I just had one
Go ahead,
comment.
Kayla.
If you do receive a court summons, we have attorneys at the Hydesville District Courthouse, as well as the Glen Burnie courthouses every day, except Wednesday. So you want to just report directly to the courthouse and see if you can get same day representation. Just don't want your phone call to get lost, because we do receive a lot of calls.
Okay. Let's do a quick round robin. We just have a few minutes left. Do any of our City of Laurel leaders who are on this call have final comments? We have about 2 minutes left in this Zoom call. Any final comments from our City of Laurel legislators who are on the call?
Yeah, I just want to take a minute to say thank everyone for attending tonight. Thanks, Ms. Wells, for coming to us valuable information. We understand your concerns and feel your pain. I agree, this is a nationwide incident going on with rent increases, and the City of Laurel is looking at it. I'm a member of the cognitive local government, so we're talking about housing, affordable housing, things of that nature. So we hear your concerns. We're looking at it. We just want to get some information out to you guys. You guys are not alone out here by yourself. So continue to stay patient and work with us. So we think we can get something done. No promises, but we hear your concerns, and thank you for attending this session tonight.
Anyone else from City of Laurel?
Yes. I wanted to thank everybody for joining. I wanted to thank Kayla for all the information that she was able to give us. And I will say that, even though this, is a nationwide issue, the rent increases that we've been seeing, are definitely not a normal thing. And, I think as a couple of the residents mentioned, it's up to us to help them, especially in the long term. I know that, me particularly, I wouldn't want to have to barter with, every landlord, that would like to do extreme rent increases on residents in the city. So, I do want to, make a promise to the people that, we will do something long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Mitchell. Appreciate that. We've got about a minute left. Go ahead, Carl.
I think we learned a valuable lesson tonight, and through all these meetings that I've attended, when you talk about affordable housing, it's definite that you need a Spanish interpreter at every one of these meetings, including this meeting. And it's so much more personable when you have them at all the other meetings I've attended. And we should, as a city, make sure that we have that representation each and every time we're going to talk about affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. We appreciate that. Kayla, final words from you?
I'm sorry everyone's having to go through this, and I'm hoping that some type of systematic change can take place, not only on the city level, but also on the state level. And again, if you have questions or if you have a court hearing, we are available to assist.
All right. So once again, real quickly.
Audrey, if I could.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mayor Mo.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple comments. Let me, Ms. Williams, thank you very much again for putting this on. This is your second time, and we appreciate all the valuable information you provided, as well as I want to thank Audrey and her shop and communication department for making sure we get this out to the community, and we'll work through those others, with the Spanish speaking, as well as those that in the deaf community, as we've done in the past. So we'll do that. I do want to make just a couple comments. The City of Laurel has had an affordable housing as well as a workforce housing policy since early 2015. Prior councils to that saw what was happening. They put that in place. We've made some changes recently to that. Where it was 3%, we actually went to 5%. We added restricted age as well. We know and we understand the market that we are in. It's not affordable. We understand that, and but we have over 80 affordable housing, moderately priced units with in the apartment complexes. The City of Laurel has over 7,000 rental units, whether it's multifamily, whether it's townhomes or homes. So we do understand that. We understand that we're in the Washington and Baltimore market, and we look to try to help and change some of those dynamics. This is not new. The City of Laurel, as well as the other municipalities, are members of the Washington Council of Governments. It's an issue that's facing us from a regional standpoint. But the City of Laurel did try to do things during the pandemic and continue to do. We have provided funding to LARS, which is the Laurel Advocacy and Referral. We've added, gave funding to CASA, and we gave some funding as well as to WSSC. Those were to help people in the City of Laurel pay for utilities, pay for rent, and in some cases, food and personal items. Those programs are still up and they're in effect. That was CARES money as well as American Rescue Plan funds. And as we receive other funding, we hope to, again, share that into the community for those that are having issues and need some support. The pandemic, I think, heightened this a lot, just like food. People that are dealing with food, personal hygiene items, and other things, it really stood out during the pandemic. And I think every elected official and community members really saw that, and we tried to step up and help as well. The affordable housing that we have is policy is not going to take care of everything. We know that, but it's one of the only policies in the area. We're one of the only jurisdictions that stood up and passed a policy when we talk about affordable housing. And we will continue to look at that and take care of that as much as possible. The administration has been working, and this is not a new announcement. Several months ago, we announced it as well. We have been working on a package of discussion points that will go to the council in mid-September at a work session. It'll talk about tax credits. For affordable housing. It'll talk about rent. It'll talk about notification processes. It'll talk about a grace period for those that may not be able to pay their rent on time or might be behind once or twice. It also talk about verbal, and it'll also talk about written agreements. As you heard, Maryland is pretty much a landlord, kicks to the landlord side, and we need to work with our landlords as well as our tenants to do what's right, what's fair, and to help everybody in the City of Laurel and all over, as you have heard. So I just wanted to mention that. You're more than welcome to contact my office. And with that said, Audrey, that's all I have. And I appreciate, again, everybody coming out tonight.
Thank you very much, Mayor Mel. Michelle Garcia, are you still on the line? Did you want to pass along that message to our Spanish speakers that are on the call with us? She may not be here. I will post that to anything we send out about this event. But on that note, I want to thank, we had a very robust conversation tonight, a lot of good information, just packed with resources and things like that. And we're going to be sharing that with the community. Once again, if you would like to watch this again, it will be on Laurel TV's official YouTube channel. sometime tomorrow, hopefully early morning. It takes a little bit of time to render it and get it up on YouTube, but we'll get it up there tomorrow. So if you need to watch again, pick up something you might have missed, it'll be there for you tomorrow. So thank you so much, Kayla Williams from CLS for being with us tonight. Thank you to the City of Laurel Mayor, Craig Moe, and all of our council people, Councilman Keith Sidnor, Martin Mitchell, Carl DeWalt, and Council President Brenton Smith, who joined us on this event as well. More information to come, so please stay tuned. I'm the Communications Director, Audrey Barnes, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Recording.